All right. Well, I'm going to switch the context, or at least focus the context purely into journals and UC Press and how and why we're working with COCO, and less about kind of giving you information about open source, but hopefully inspiring you to kind of get involved. So around this time last year, maybe a bit earlier, Adam and Kristen from COCO were at UC Press, I think, at an editorial meeting talking about the books publishing workflow tool. And around that time, they just said to me, well, would you be interested, as representing the non-traditional journals at UC Press, in helping coordinate a journals-based project, which ended up being XPub, which has already been spoken about a little bit here. But for me, answering yes, did I want to get involved with that, was extremely easy. At UC Press, we're already working with multiple systems. I think across 35 journals, which actually isn't that many, we're using all the big ones. We're using ScholarOne, Editorial Manager, Scholastica, OJS, Ubiquity Press's version of OJS, and BenchPress. And even I myself have created manuscript tracking systems for journals utilizing Google Docs and Slack and things like that. So we're certainly getting so much insight into how all these systems worked. And whatever the differences between all the systems, one of the things I always felt was lacking was a modular and shared infrastructure approach across all of this. I mean, the peer review workflow for journals is at its core universal. An article is submitted, undergoes some kind of peer review, is accepted or rejected. Now, there are nuances and different workflows for different types of items in there, et cetera, but I was just of the impression that the whole system could benefit with some interoperability and collaboration. And, I also wanted to put, UC Press's money where my mouth was, I guess. I work really closely with the scientific communities on the journals that I run, and I just felt, I'm an advocate for open science and, in collaborative work. And I thought, well, if I'm an advocate for the transparent sharing of science and data and materials and methods, et cetera, in order to make scientific progress as efficient as possible, then why should I not assign those same values to the scholarly communication and workflow process as well? Now, I mean, this might be a stretch to imagine it that way, at least right now, but I'm of the opinion that why should a breakthrough system like COCO's ingestion and conversion software, as Christian was talking about, or some of the editing kind of in the browser systems that are being developed, why should those not be to the benefit of companies or projects like OJS or Ares or ScholarOne, et cetera? I do think for-profit and non-profit companies utilizing the fruits of these open source labors is the end game that I actually believe in. So choosing to work with COCO was not choosing the seventh system on this list. To me, it's more a decision or a choice to think differently about how I want to think about these systems. And, maybe whilst we're working on a Collabora Psychology XPub project, maybe the main way that UC Press ends up utilizing the fruits of XPub is via one of these vendors. I don't know, but, that's the kind of commitment I'm making to start kind of thinking about things this way. So, how did we get started? Well, obviously, I had to learn coding and start to get really comfortable with the command line. No, I didn't. It started with people. You're hearing a lot from technical people, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about these projects as, well, I just don't know how to get started. How does it work? This is not what we use. I'm used to buying something from a box, and it works perfectly. This all started. These are actual scientific editors, professors, associate professors, talking to us, and facilitated sessions, about how we want things to work, how things currently do work, and establishing that there are plenty of things that work really well, just as much there are a few things or plenty of things that don't work ideally. And I really kind of say this to inspire all of you, and again, it's been said a couple of times already that we are, all of us, especially at a conference like this, pretty much all experts, and we know what it is that we want to do. And we probably could be feeding more back into the projects and systems that we use to support that which we want to do. Juan admitted it himself. I mean, we're working with systems that quite naturally and quite completely okay, are sometimes a bit old. That's not to say that they're wrong. They're just based in a way that we used to do things back 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. And, all the good ones like OJS, etc. We're all iterating, we're all developing, and we're all making these things very much better. But I think it's very important for those of us as users to be part of this process and not think of it as, well, there's a bunch of technology companies who can fix all this and then sell it all back to it. So really, I do want to bring us in on time, so I'll probably shorten these comments. But my point is that really do get involved. Think about, how you and the companies that you represent and the publishers that you represent, if you're kind of thinking about, well, I really would like to be involved in something along these lines, or the publisher I represent, is interested in a different editorial system, and we're trying to decide whether it's between this one or that one. Well, I would encourage you to talk to me afterwards, or just have a think about how you can engage in kind of helping design an interoperable kind of future for all of these kinds of things that we're seeing with all these projects like Metadata 2020 and Open Citations and etc. Let me just look. So, good thing to point out here, look at me kind of schooling eLife in how Xpub should work there. But what we've got on the cards is that we will have a live test of certainly our instance of Xpub later this year. What you will see in the first instance is what we're calling a thin slice through the system. So of course, I think when people think of like the next editorial system or the next big thing or anything that claims to be an improvement over the previous thing, sometimes the feeling is that it's going to be just like the sleekest kind of Lamborghini when we've been dealing with kind of, average cars before. That's not what probably most people are going to see from Collabora's Xpub. You're going to just see a really slick and efficient and simple way of a workflow for a journal. It will have ingestion conversion, built into it at its core. It will have a really simple way of all working on the same document rather than this notion of like a metaphysical object passing down an assembly line where you have to go back if you make a mistake rather than just have invite the reviewer back to look at this document. So I think of it as a kind of almost like a palimpsest, a pile that creates on top of a document rather than the notion of a document passing through a workflow. But what people will see first is a kind of a thin slice through a system where to familiarize users with this new way of thinking about a workflow, this notion that articles are ingested, the notion that people can actually work and author and edit in the system, that will be the kind of the lead feature on the thin slice. And hopefully that will kind of introduce people to this new way of working with documents going through a journal workflow. And then, once people get that familiarity, once we kind of do some live testing of the journal, we can start to build all the cool vertical features on top of it that will, turn it into the flashy system that I think we're all, presuming these systems of the future will become. So I'll keep it short. I would just encourage you all to get involved, see if you can work with any of these companies with a facilitated session. If you think you have a plan or a way that your company would like to work, then consider this option and talk to me afterwards, because I can talk to you at length how awesome it's been and how, for the first time I really feel like we have users that have defined the system that they intend to use rather than kind of a defined product, a product that has been defined by other people that didn't necessarily, that I might think didn't understand what it is that I want to do. Anyway, I'll finish it there.